welcome in to a new edition of One Chi here on UK Health Radio. I'm Clara Apollo, Qigong teacher and lover of dance and movement and meditation and sound and being here on the planet at the time that we have now, that we're all together. We have this remit to be dancing that which wants to be here on the planet at the moment. I don't even know what that means. And with me on this episode is the author and teacher of Qigong, internal martial arts, mindfulness and yoga. Mimi Kuo-Deemer is here. So thank you so much for being my guest.
Well, thank you, Clara. It's really nice to see you again and to be here. And you reminded me that the last time was pre-COVID. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had a lovely chat when One Chi, that hub for Qigong teachers, was just starting out. And there is that video that we did back then that I've just looked at recently, and you have had 1,111 views as I watched it.
Ah,
what a piece of magic is in there, eh?
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear at least someone's interested in listening.
Of course they are. You have a really sort of devoted following, actually. People love what you're bringing through in that book that you have. I mean, I say it's a recent book, but actually it's probably been out a couple of years now, hasn't it?
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years, exactly. Which is called Qigong and Tai Chi Axis.
Exactly.
Exactly. So let's begin with, so this whole show, so with Qi time, we have this connection with Qigong all the way through. Whoever I'm speaking to will always bring it back to that connection with your energy and your Qi. But not everybody on the show is a Qigong teacher. So this is really great that you're here, and we can dive into maybe some deeper arenas or areas around Qigong for the here and now, you know, how it's really useful and relevant for what we're dealing with, as you said, post-COVID, you know, all the problems with the lungs that have been going on. And of course, as we're at time of recording this is October 2021, so we are deep in the metal element season, and I know the elements are something that really float your boat, aren't they? So
yes, that's a nice image because it conjures a sense of being on the water, and then the metal container of the ship or a wooden ship, depending on what kind of a boat. Sure. But I am indeed a lover of the 5 phases, wuxing, or elements. Metal in particular is a strong one, though. For myself, it hasn't always come as an easy element, I would say.
Can we get into this in a moment, because it was also the one that challenges me. So how about, for people that don't know you, or even people that do, how did Qigong first find you? How did you, because didn't you used to do dance and yoga? Wasn't that your thing?
Yeah, I started off with turned in toes. I was born with all kinds of health problems, and my mother thought, you know, to correct one of the physical problems that she saw, my knees were a little bit weak and my toes were pigeon-toed. So she stuck me in ballet school when I was 3, and I was really uncomfortable in in tutus and tight stockings. And later, I had that little bit of a taste, but later I did come back to dance, and I was never really very good at dance, I have to be honest, but I really enjoyed the expression of it and the creativity of it. And then later I found yoga at a point in time where my health was really not, I was really struggling with my health. And Qigong was something that came to me after I'd done some yoga, but pretty soon after I'd started teaching yoga. So the first time I ever did Qigong was as a kid, in, kind of the optimal place that one could have a first experience was just in the Shaolin temple. But that was just as a kid, as a teenager. And when I really sort of felt that Qigong as a practice was more than just, something occasional, was in 2003. in 2004. I met someone named Matthew Cohen, who is a teacher in Los Angeles. He's a martial artist, a Qigong practitioner. He does dance, yoga. He has a lot of different skills, but his main love really was Tai Chi and Qigong. And he was integrating that with movement that I found just inspiring. And his introduction to the practice grounded my yoga and grounded my energy in a way that was markedly different than any other practice that I had done. Made me feel a lot less out there, as in spaced out or ungrounded. And it gave me a connection to a steady solidity, like an oak tree. And that sparked my interest. And then I met Cameron Tukapua, who is interestingly, all of this was happening in China. I was living in Beijing at the time, but I met an acupuncturist, Cameron Tukapua, who was living in New Zealand, had opened a school for acupuncture and Chinese medicine. She was a good friend of my yoga teacher, Donna Farhi. We met in New Zealand. I invited her to come and do a retreat in Beijing, and she themed it around the 5 elements. And that just opened my doors to a whole world of health and healing and connection to nature that I think I'd always longed for, but didn't have the avenue through which to really understand and embody and explore it. And she taught me a series of 5 element practices that I did every day. They started to dramatically shift my health, and I never looked back since then.
Yeah, I can understand that. And just bringing up what you said, that connection to nature, because this is one of the call of nature, as opposed to the call to nature, but the call of nature to come and be in the presence of true balance. And well, more than balance, it's harmony, isn't it? It's the harmony of the different elements. And we hear about the earthing, the grounded, but with the Qigong practice and this focus on the elements, it takes it to a whole new level of embodiment. It really can become us if we open and receive and let ourselves.
I 100% agree. And in the, so coming up to 18, 19 years that I've been practicing Qigong, I think the greatest treasure for me is really a feeling that I am nothing but nature manifest in human form.
Beautiful.
And that there's a real shift in how I was schooled and educated, which not to any fault of my own, I don't think. It's just the dominant narrative, which is man particularly has dominion over nature, and that we're at the top of the food chain, and that my view and my lens was through a human-centric lens. And what has really shifted over this time for me is a non-hierarchical view of where human beings are in the landscape of this incredible planet and universe. And it's given me a sense of connection and belonging and of reciprocity, as opposed to separateness and aloofness and being at the top of a hierarchy, or a model of power and domination or control over nature. Has shifted to one of reciprocity and mutual support, cooperation, and really, really deep respect for everything that lives and breathes within me and around me as part of a matrix and mystery that is nature. Right?
So right. And I like the way that you bring up the word power, because we often refer to the power of the earth and the power within us, but it's not this power over, it's not that controlling, is it? It's like the yin holding power of being. It's when we can let ourselves be our true nature, or as you said, be an expression of true nature, that power is coursing through us if we step back in and let it. So we don't need to reach for any extra power, because that's huge.
I think what for me is a shift of one idea about power, which is of domination and control, and competition, and in a sense, it's a very masculine approach to power, to a sense of power like you were describing, of power within, and power to regenerate, and power to support, and power to create, and it's soft power like water, which is most like the Tao, which is for those of you unfamiliar with the connections philosophically, Taoism particularly, but also Buddhism has informed the evolution and development of movement arts in China, particularly the internal martial arts and Qigong.
So let's bring back this elusive metal element, because if you're listening and we say metal element to you, what does that conjure up? And obviously maybe metal, clearly, but what does that mean to me? What is that about? Because in the shamanic principles, it tends to be the air and the fire and the water and the earth. But with the traditional Chinese medicine, we've got metal in there, and we've got wood as well. So what is it? What's the difference or the similarities between the metal and the air element?
I don't often draw parallels anymore like that, to be honest. I often get this question of, why isn't there an air element in the Chinese model? And my response more recently is, you could ask the same question in converse. Why isn't there a wood or metal element in the Ayurvedic or other systems? It's just based on what people observed. Yeah. It's as natural in one's kind of relationships with the ideas at the time, the relationships that were really understood and perceived, to create these associations. So there, in Chinese medicine, though, there's a relationship of the metal element to the lungs, but there's also a relationship of the wood element to wind. And so that's why I tend not to draw conclusions or parallels between different systems anymore. It is just its own system. But again, coming back, in Chinese medicine and Qigong and Chinese cosmology, there's yin and yang in the original kind of construct of energy, which came out of something, if we want to think of it like the Big Bang, like there was this primordial soupy nothingness, and then something combined in such a way to create this movement and flow from nothing into something. And then within yin and yang, you have these corresponding phases, and the phases they referred to as what we think of as elements, and each had an association of either a more yin aspect or an ascending or descending yin quality and yang quality. Metal is considered one of the yin phases of yin and yang. It's known as the ascending yin phase, metal. And in part, it's the reason for that is that it's produced, the yin and yang represent sort of the balance of the whole. And there's 5 elements, and wood is often thought of as spring, and it's kind of a creation and a beginning and a vision element and phase. Wood feeds the burning of fire, which is summer, and kind of the maturing of the plans that wood element might have. And then it goes into a period of, sometimes people say late summer or earth. And if you think about the ashes of fire burning into earth, earth produces precious gemstones and precious metals like gold and silver and platinum, copper, but it also manifests as the rocks in the world and the mountains and the stones and the sand.
And the crystals.
And the crystals, yeah. And that associates with autumn as a season. And the metal element, I actually just watched a documentary recently on the BBC, The Molecule of Life, H2O. And I always knew that metal supported or birthed water, but I wasn't quite sure about the connection until on this documentary, they saw how, they showed how rocks, when broken open, released water vapor early on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so water isn't thought to be extraterrestrial, as some theories might propose, but it actually emerged out of the heat and the compression from the ground, and water emerged out from the rocks as vapor. And so metal, autumn leads to winter, which is the water elements season. And then winter moves back, as we hope, to spring, and water nourishes wood. So those of you unfamiliar with the cycle of the 5 elements, this is the creation cycle. There's a control cycle as well that keeps everything in check and balance. But autumn, being associated to metal, is a time of letting things contract and cool and slow down. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people in the world, and myself probably earlier in my life, preferenced doing and expanding and spring and growth more than contracting and cooling. Right? Yeah, exactly. That we think of contraction and decline, and it's like, oh, I don't want that. I want growth and expansion. But actually, I love autumn now. I love the cooling and contracting and the slowing down and the refinement. And last night the stars, for example, and the moon were so bright because the temperatures have dropped. Yeah.
And it's the calling in. Thank you. Mimi Kuo-Deemer is here with us on Mimi Kuo-Deemer is here with us on Chi Time. And we're talking about the metal element and Qigong in relevance to our life in the world that we're in right now. And we're going to go to a track now. And I'm glad you mentioned the words gold and flow, gold being the metal element and flow being in the water, because I've got a very sweet instrumental now by DJ Taz Rashid called Gold Flow. So we'll come back with Mimi after this deliciousness and continue on with unpacking this mysterious metal element with you. So before those few station messages, there's a track by DJ Taz Rashid called Gold Flow. You're here on Chi Time with me, Clara Apollo, on UK Health Radio, and my guest is Mimi Kuo-Deemer. Yes, I'm pronouncing her name correctly now. So, and we're discussing Qigong and the metal element in particular. And just before the track, Mimi was explaining the whole circuit of the elements around the seasons. And it was fascinating to find out some new information as to how metal transforms into water via the splitting of the rocks and the releasing of vapor, which is something I'd not heard of before. So thank you so much for sharing that information. And as you mentioned also before the break, the metal element is the one that takes care of the lungs. And with the situation in the world with the recent virus really playing havoc with so many people's lungs, I know that's, there are other words that we could use, but there are a lot of folk that come into my classes and stuff, which I'm sure you have too, that say, what can I do to help really strengthen my lungs? Or is there anything that I can do to strengthen my lungs? And I immediately think metal element Qigong. So I'd love to find out what you could suggest around this element and how it can help people with their lung health.
Yeah, so in the correlative theory, all of the phases have associated organ pairs. So the metal elements organs are the lungs and the large intestine. couple things that really come to mind in one definition of Qigong that I love, or one quality, is that it circulates the blood without taxing the lungs. And the lungs are considered the second in command in Chinese medicine and Qigong to the heart. And often we think, oh, we got to build a stronger heart and respiratory cardiovascular system by doing things like running or swimming, something that gets the aerobic activity and the heart rate up. In Qigong, it is actually not seen as a good thing to increase the heart rate, because that can start to tax the lungs, send the nervous system into a more sympathetic response, and generally drain the organ system. My shifu in Beijing, there's a saying in Chinese that he often likes to say, 汗出气不传, which means the sweat pours, but the breath never quickens. And one of the things that I've heard a lot of my students say, and that I've noticed, is that by moving through Qigong forms, I get warm. My students get warm. They're surprised often by how hot their hands and feet feel after not really doing that much.
It's sneaky like that, isn't it?
Yeah. And, they're very spherical, circular movements sometimes. They're things that repeat, kind of in Qigong particularly. They're things that open and close the arms, or gently kind of create spiral patterns through the body. And this is because these circular, repetitive, soft, fluid movements invite the circulation of qi to move through the blood. The blood is really instrumental in Qigong and Chinese medicine. You want to activate the muscles, which then start to instill the command, right, in the body to pump the blood when the muscles are going. And then the blood is what carries the energy, or qi, to all of the cells. So a lot of Qigong is, for example, like a famous one is opening the bow in the 8 brocades. It engages the muscles. You imagine opening a bow. It's not like strong, but it's soft, right? You're opening the bow, and then you're lengthening gradually the muscles, and then you're relaxing them. And this is an amazing way to activate the qi flow through the blood by recruiting the muscles, recruiting the tendons that connect the muscles to bones, and then relaxing. And this is a really important message to the brain of this pattern. It's called pandiculation in fancy.
Oh, that is a good word. And just as you were doing that, I was feeling the elasticity of the lung tissue as well, with that lengthening of the muscle. The way that it moves smoothly through our body is something that is replicated deep within our system. We have this smooth way of being with ourselves, not sudden rush and whatever. There's a respect there, isn't there?
Well, we're watery creatures, but we forget that. And Qigong is hard for people sometimes because it asks them to be more fluid and tap into the fluid body, which is 70 to 80% of our mass, and to feel that strength of water, which I mentioned at the beginning, the soft strength of water, to start using that to create I suppose openness through the connective tissue of the body, the tendons, the sinews, really again helps the flow of qi. And when the qi is optimally flowing through the body, then everything sort of comes into balance. I mean, that's kind of the goal of Qigong is optimal qi flow. Problem is it gets excessive or deficient, or there's blocks and obstacles. And so, movements like this, they start to unblock the flow of whatever's been blocked. They unblock, and then they start to promote the optimized flow of qi that doesn't tax the lungs. Yeah. And we don't want the lungs to be in
Exactly.
Qigong
So
or
there's
in Chinese medicine.
in this thing about activating the lungs doesn't mean, as you say, activating. It means this gentle encouragement and nourishment, or this nurturing of the lung tissue,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. And another another quality of Qigong is breathing. And in Qigong and the internal martial arts, 长慢细, 长慢平细深, 长 long breath as opposed to short breath, 慢 slow breath as opposed to fast or quick, 平 even and steady breath as opposed to choppy and irregular. 细 is refined breath as a coarse, as opposed to kind of a coarse. I think of sea salt, right? Fine sea salt, coarse sea salt. And then 深, which is deep rather than shallow. So we're really inviting the breath, not by forcing it ever, but simply through the invitation to start slowing down, moving deeper. When that happens, the lung tissue itself is very fine and delicate. The outer kind of edges of the lungs are like the leaves of trees, the alveoli, right? They're very fine and very delicate. And the lung's job is, in metal element, is the refinement of pure qi, of pure breath. And then the refining of that through those very fine, delicate veins before it can circulate through the body. And so, when we're starting to breathe in that way, and it's long, fine, slow, even, deep, then we're letting that refinement process happen. We're starting maybe to breathe to the outer edges of the lungs, where there's this beautiful oxygenation process taking place. Breathing is also a fluid process as it moves from the lung tissue into the venous nerve and the venous blood flow, and it's often just shortchanged, right? We breathe high up, and so we don't get down. We don't let the breath slide back and down to those areas where the refinement is actually taking place, and also as a result, we sometimes lose that sense of care for the lungs as well. Like we breathe high up. In Qigong, by the slowness of the depth of the breathing, we let the energy sink down a little bit and soften out into these lower, often overlooked areas of the back lungs. And actually the lung tissue, especially in COVID, or people who have had breathing problems. I've grown up with asthma. The lung tissue gets easily damaged because those outer edges are so fine and delicate, and then that can harden into kind of atrophied tissue. And what we want to be doing is just a very soft opening and releasing and spaciousness, so that anything that has been atrophied and hardened can be softened again, brought back into use, the breath, and can move more fully and express itself all the way through the whole chambers of the lungs.
Yeah, be reminded of its true nature,
Yeah. And breathing out, exhaling is eliminating up to 70% of your body's toxicity and waste.
Wow.
Just really.
Yeah, because that's the link between the lungs and the large intestine, is that they excrete, but also the skin can also be linked in with the metal element as well. And we don't often think about that being an excretory organ. Well, it sweats. But also this interface between the spacious outside, well, all the space of the air outside, but this, we breathe it in. It's an intimate act, breathing the air in. And yet there is this delicate interface in there that is just, being respectful of that process. But also, I feel, as you were speaking there about the breathing into the back of the lungs, I don't know if anyone listening, they might like to put their hands on their lower back and just feel that indeed is where you feel your ribs move. And
Yeah.
well, I'm breathing into my back. I hadn't thought of that. And of course, that brings us in touch with the kidneys as well, doesn't it? So you think, whoa, there's such wisdom in our system here that when we can trust and drop into that natural flow, it's already there.
Mm.
You just need to unpick all the patterns that have got on top of it
Precisely.
over the years. So do you think that the awareness of the lower dantian and that curiosity about that space invites the breath to become deeper and more robust?
Yeah, there definitely could be value for lots of reasons to focus on the lower dantian. But I think also the natural breathing process, when we can let go of the tightening and the tension around our center, which is often just corrugated with rust and corroded and kind of tight, when we can learn to soften and release this area and free the breath, I think that it naturally kind of invites a sense of balance to come back in.
Mm.
And then also things that, the lung meridians, they run from the kind of inner armpit chest area down the inner arms and to the thumbs. It gets picked up by the large intestine on the index finger that travels back and comes around. But these movements in Qigong, for example, of things like this, I demonstrate, it's called separating clouds, or things like this that I was showing earlier. The lengthening and opening through these channels, through movement, as well as through intention, and inviting a sense that, there's a flow of energy down through these pathways.
But there's also a breathing. So Mimi is showing us like this opening of the arms and then bringing them back together. When you can feel that the breath is being expressed in the movement. And that's one of the beauties of Qigong. This combination of moving to the rhythm of your breath is just so beautiful. But anyway, yeah, carry on.
Yeah, and you can move to the rhythm of the breath, but even more important is just natural breath in Qigong.
Yeah.
And then, to differentiate it from practices that also involve breathing and movement, such as yoga, which I've taught and I've done for a long time. For me, the main distinctive quality is intentionality. The sense that I'm pointing down here because our brain isn't actually our mind in Qigong. Our mind, this is consciousness up here, heart and mind. But focus and mind and intention is down in your spleen. Who knew? But to when we focus our intention on the movement of the body or through a visualization practice, it contributes to the overall health and well-being of the body, because it's the mind, they say, that directs the qi, and the qi that affects and impacts our blood. And our blood is, basically our makeup. It really is how we show up in the world. It's so important to kind of enrich the circulatory blood of the body through the qi flow. But it starts with mind intention.
Breath. It's also so combined. Oh, thank you, Mimi. It's been so fascinating speaking with you here on Chi Time. Is there anything that you would like to leave people with, like a short practice or something to consider, or just something to kind of wrap this up in a beautiful metal element, Mimi gorgeousness for us?
I think it's that quality of refinement and the preciousness of the metal element. When we tap into the breath, and if you can, like Clara was suggesting, even put your hands on the lower back, imagine that the breath moving to the outer edges and lower lobes of the lungs. It connects us to life, right? And an appreciation and a deepening treasuring of the life that we have as a result of our ability to be breathing. And that's one of the beautiful qualities of the metal element, is its ability in the letting go of things, to show what is of true value, like what is most important in our lives. And I think when we can really feel the care and the support through our awareness of the lungs, we can also, do the delicate and important thing of letting go of what's ready to move on and awaken to what is really there to appreciate, be grateful for, to honor and respect. Be that just the beauty of the earth, or the fact that you're even alive.
Thank you. Beautiful. The miracle of life. Let's not overlook that one, because you are the miracle. Mimi Kuo-Deemer, how can people find out more about you? Where can they go?
I have information on my website, which is mkdeemer.com.
So that's spelt D-E-E-M-E-R.
Yeah, M is in Mimi, and then K, Deemer.com. And I'm on the usual suspects for social media, except for Twitter. I'm not really big on Twitter.
No, do we really have to? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And, a number of different online classes, DVDs and online programs on Vimeo and Amazon Prime. Lots of material out there.
Yeah. We all had to learn how to do that last year. Us Qigong teachers, and within the One Chi Hub, some of the discussions we've had is that how you transfer being in person to being online. But I think that's a conversation for another time. And just thank you so much for being here and to sharing your wisdom and your quintessential beingness with us. It's just beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
You're really welcome. And I've got a track to play you at the end. So I didn't know what I was going to play, right? I was thinking, what is Mimi? I wonder what. And as you, the course of talking through this interview, you did mention water a lot, and being like water is such a classic phrase. And then it reminds me of like Bruce Lee's "Be Like Water, My Friend." I'm like, oh, there's a track by Melody Sheep that we can bring in, which is a remix using his vocals and some of the key salient points about being like water. So I'm going to play out with that. But how does that sound?
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for listening or watching. If you want to find out more about what I get up to, you can head over to claraapollo.com or my YouTube channel, Chi Time TV, or my podcast, Clara Apollo's Chi Time. But here we are on UK Health Radio, where you can listen again on demand. And we will be back again next time with some more Chi-ful, well, not just discussions, but also tips and techniques to help you become more connected to the truth of who you really are and the health that is within you, wanting to support you in your life. So we're all in this together, and wish you well. Keep your chi up, my friends. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. Here's Melody Sheep with "Be Like Water, My Friend." Thank you to Bruce Lee.
It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water, like